A new national poll shows a bit of a dip in support for Donald Trump following his decision to skip last week's Republican primary debate and to surrender to Georgia authorities and get that mugshot on Thursday. According to the latest Emerson College survey released this morning, Trump's support dropped 6 points from a poll taken earlier this month. The former president, though, still leading his opponents overwhelmingly.
That's right. Donald Trump has actually lost a little bit of ground in the polling after skipping the first Republican primary debate and then getting his mugshot taken and released the next day. Now, if Trump were to fall behind, which candidate would be the most likely to take his place? Well, first of all, let's just note no one's even close yet, but the results are really interesting. So to figure that out, we need to take a closer look at this Emerson College poll of GOP primary voters, right? So they're asking likely Republican voters how they felt following the debate. Now, the following graphic compares numbers from the Emerson poll released on August 19th, which was of course before the debate and the mugshot, to Emerson's latest poll, which was released today, August 28th. With that said, here are the results, okay? So as you can see, Trump dipped about 6 points. Then you have DeSantis gaining 2 points from 10% to 12%. Vivek Ramaswamy actually lost a percentage point from 10% to 9%. And then you see both Mike Pence and Nikki Haley increasing their support in this poll. Mike Pence from 3% to 7%, Nikki Haley from 2% to 7%. Jake, were we wrong in our analysis following that debate?
No, and so there's something super interesting that you're about to see. Those are the numbers now a couple of days, obviously, after the event, right? But Anna, can you share with them the numbers right after the debate?
Which candidate do you think won the debate, if anyone? And what's really interesting is 18.2% believe that Vivek Ramaswamy won the debate.
Isn't that interesting? He came in #1 right after the debate, but several days later, he's actually lost ground. That's weird. Now, to be fair, DeSantis and Nikki Haley did well there, coming in second and third. Pence was further down. Now, there's another poll right after the debate, and that one, DeSantis did well, 29%, but guess who came in second with a super solid 26%? Vivek Ramaswamy. Nikki Haley much further down at 15%, Pence way down at 7%. But that is not what the polling today shows. So why the disparity? And mind you guys, we're the fairest show in America. If you watched it earlier, I can't stand Vivek Ramaswamy. But we watched that debate and our analysis was that the Republican voters would think that Vivek Ramaswamy won. And the polling right after the debate showed that we were either completely right or relatively right, right? But then all of a sudden he loses ground and Nikki Haley gains big ground. Mike Pence, who didn't do well in the debate at all in the polling, gains big ground. Why? Because of media coverage. Because the media then twists it and says Ramaswamy did terrible. Now look, I don't like the guy. I didn't like any of his policy positions, any of his statements. But what's happened? He's been attacked 24/7 after the debate, and Nikki Haley was put up there on a pedestal like the greatest performance, unbelievable, both on MSNBC and Fox News, right?
Yes, in fact, there seems to be universal disdain for Vivek Ramaswamy, even among conservative news outlets like Fox News. Prior to the debate, I remember seeing a segment where Bret Baier was particularly critical of Ramaswamy in a way that you don't typically see with Bret Baier and other Republican candidates. And so I do think, your theory that the media might have played a role in public opinion has some merit behind it for sure. But when it comes to Nikki Haley, remember we talked about that Fox News, Fox and Friends segment where they were talking about how she won the debate and they were pleasantly surprised by her performance. So I do think the media has some impact. I mean, don't discount the power of propaganda and how much of an influence media narratives play in how people think about the political field and who they want to vote for.
Guys, media is by far the biggest factor. Think about it. A lot of people watch that debate, about 12.8 million people. But so many more people saw media coverage of it afterwards. Probably 5 to 10 times as many people. And what did they see? They didn't see what actually happened in the debate. They saw a skewed version of what happened in the debate.
Damn right, especially considering what Fox News did with being incredibly restrictive with how much of that content we could use in our programming, right?
Yes, and so what they saw was, oh my God, I guess Nikki Haley did great. And who's the other guy that they praised to no end? Mike Pence. And the media praised Mike Pence, and all of a sudden Mike Pence goes up, even though right after the debate, the Republican voters thought he sucked. And so that's the power of media. And by the way, that's also the reason why Bernie Sanders was never able to get over the hump in 2016 and 2020. And I talk about this in my book, Justice is Coming. When Bernie won, he would get nothing but negative coverage. When Biden won one state, finally, South Carolina, after getting humiliated in the first 3 states, he got overwhelmingly positive coverage. And that affected Super Tuesday enormously, let alone what they did to Bernie in 2016. Exactly. So this is how the media pretends to be objective, but actually skews the results to what they want. And in a second, I'll get to why they attack Ramaswamy so much. There's a couple of different reasons why.
So one other theory is that the voters are a little more privy to the differences between politics, meaning the optics that candidates engage in on the debate stage, versus policy. Because if you take a look at some of the research done by Data for Progress, they found that the majority of voters actually do not favor the policies that were represented on that debate stage. I'll give you a few examples. Let's take a look at graphic 4. It's a chart kind of showing you where most voters stand on specific issues. Only 24% of all likely voters support shutting down the Department of Education, something that Vivek Ramaswamy said he would like to accomplish should he be voted in as president. 67% oppose that proposal and 9% aren't sure. Only 28% of likely voters support breaking up the teachers' unions. 58% oppose the proposal, only 14% aren't sure. Only 37% of likely voters support sending US military forces into Mexico to fight drug cartels, an absolutely ludicrous suggestion. 53% luckily oppose the proposal, 10% aren't sure. And finally, only 40% of likely voters support pardoning Donald Trump for any criminal charges against him. 52% oppose the proposal, 8% aren't sure. Now keep in mind that this polling has to do with all likely voters of all different political affiliations. And so if you were to just talk to likely Republican voters, I would guess that some of these results would be very different, including the last one about how they feel about pardoning Donald Trump. I think a larger share of Republican voters would want Trump to be pardoned. But nonetheless, you get the point. A lot of these, you can see the vast majority of Americans, including Republicans, showing that they do not support these ideas.
Yeah, so I want to highlight 3 things real quick in the poll. Donald Trump's numbers on whether he did these things and whether he's a criminal and it should be accountability, et cetera, they keep sliding on him. Like he started out, and this is not surprising, when he first gets charged, his base rallies around him, right? And Republicans rally around him. But now it's starting to slowly deteriorate. And 17% of Republicans now poll said that they would not want him pardoned if he was convicted by a Republican president. They're like, do not pardon him. 17% of Republicans. So that's interesting. So that 17% ain't gonna vote for Trump. And so look, it's not a big number, but it's bigger than it was before. And so there's some movement there, okay? And number 2 is, when it comes to the issues, 75% of Americans want higher taxes on the rich and corporations. Now, all the Republicans pretend to be populist. Have you ever heard them say that in any debate ever in American history? Never. Will they ever say that? Look, Ramaswamy is the hungriest, thirstiest man in America, right? Even he wouldn't say that. Like that's 3/4 of Americans saying, please raise taxes on the rich and corporations. But they're not gonna say it, you know why? Because they work for the rich and corporations. That is the whole point of the Republican Party. Now you wanna hear a disastrous end of the poll. After all these bad numbers for Trump, et cetera, at the end of the poll, they tell you, by the way, if the election were held today, Trump would beat Biden by 2 points. Biden is in worse shape than Trump. No matter how many times you say it, everybody in Washington has blinders on. And they're like, no, Biden's gonna win. Biden's the only one who could win. Biden's the only one who could win. He's losing to a monsterish clown. like a bozo that walked off the street, and he's losing to him by 2 points. I think Biden's almost the only Democrat who could lose to a guy like Trump. All right, now back to Ramaswamy for the last point. Why did they pillory him even on Fox News? 3 reasons. One, he says outlandish things to draw attention, and even we can't resist attacking him, but that gets him more attention, which is good in the beginning, okay? Number 2 is they don't need access to him in the long run. They might want to interview him now for giggles, right? But they need access to Republicans in the long run, so they cannot criticize Republicans. So they like to gain credibility in these moments by going, oh, it was tough on a guy running for president. Who was it? Oh, a guy who has no power and won't be around anymore, right? That's why they all act like tough guys around that. And finally, it's because corporate media despises outsiders. Outsiders might change things. That's their general vibe. I don't think Ramaswamy would change a damn thing. He'd just give everything to the rich as usual. But generally speaking, they know that the politicians are controlled and will serve corporate interests. Anyone onto the outside on the right or the left, corporate media despises.
And remember, the media, including conservative media, was not friendly to Trump during the Republican primaries in 2016 because they considered him an outsider. And so I don't know if Ramaswamy has the ability to do what Trump has the ability to do, which is appeal to voters so much, Republican voters, of course, to the point where he overcomes the media propaganda against him. We'll see, but it is really interesting to see how these polls played out following the first primary debate. Obviously, we'll keep you guys updated as we learn more and as more polls come out.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.